Good afternoon. Let me welcome you to our webinar on the implementation of the EU emission trading system and the revised monitoring, reporting, verification system for the maritime emissions. So my name is Polona Grigorin, and I'm the head of unit in the European Commission, Directorate General for Climate Action, the unit that is responsible for maritime emissions. And again, it's a pleasure to welcome you at today's webinar that we are organizing with our colleagues from the European Maritime Safety Agency, EMSA. You may already know that this is a fourth seminar in a series of seminars that we launched back in September with the objective to support you, the industry, in implementing the EU ETS extension to the shipping sector. Today's session is dedicated to the revision of the monitoring plans, because we, of course, had a revision of the monitoring and reporting rules, which, of course, then also impact the monitoring plans and require their revision and update. So companies should finalize the revision for the ships active within the scope of the EU ETS by 1st of April 2024, so this year, by submitting the monitoring plan in the THETIS MRV system to the administering authority. We see from the data in the THETIS MRV trends that many companies have already started undertaking the necessary steps to revise the monitoring plans, and we thank you all for your contribution and engagement on this. But of course, we also expect that the vast majority of the revised monitoring plans is to be submitted and processed in the coming weeks. So for today, our objective is to guide you through this revision exercise, both in terms of content and process. And for that, we have today's agenda structured along three main items. One, first, the brief state of play on the ETS implementation, and then going into the main points of today, which is the in-depth analysis of the revised monitoring plan exercise, followed by an extensive live demo by our EMSA colleagues to guide you through the IT functionalities in the THETIS MRV system for the revision and submission of the monitoring plans. I also take the opportunity to already flag the next fifth webinar that we envisage hosting, that will focus on the attribution of shipping companies to the administering authority, because we know that there's maybe still some opportunity or some room for further clarifications on this, as well as on the functioning of the Union Registry. So that will be held on 18th of March, so basically in 2 weeks' time, and the registrations will open soon through the usual channels. Let me also recall again that, of course, the recordings of the previous webinars, as well as the presentations, are publicly available through our CLIMA and EMSA web pages. And we would really recommend you consult those as well if you have any questions, because they provide a lot of answers to any questions that you might have on the extension of the ETS to maritime. And we will also proceed to the publication of today's webinar in the coming days. So please know that this webinar is recorded and will be further distributed, but the name of participants will be fully anonymized. In terms of process for today, as we again have a high number of participants, we would ask you that you submit any questions you may have in the chat, and we will address those during the dedicated points at the end of today's agenda. So let me finish by thanking you in advance very much for your active participation, and I now pass the floor to our colleague, Timothy Noel, to launch the first presentation.
Thank you, Polona, for giving me the floor, and good morning to all participants. So my name is Timothy Noel. I'm working in the same unit as Polona in Directorate General for Climate Action. And in this first presentation, I would like to highlight 4 topics. First, we would like to give you a state of play of where we are in terms of the legislative process. Then we would like to highlight again all the tools and activities that are available to you to help you in the implementation process. We will also in this first presentation look at the most recent IT development as regards to THETIS MRV. And I will go with you again through the first compliance steps from a shipping company perspective. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. So in terms of state of play of the legislative process, what you need to keep in mind is that, generally speaking, the legal framework is finalized. From the point of view of primary legislation, you have access to the consolidated version of the revised ETS directive and to the amended regulation on the monitoring, reporting, and verification of GHG emissions from maritime transport on the link that are presented on the slide that you can also find on our website. We have also, over the last months, adopted and published a number of secondary legislative acts that we call delegated act and implementing act that set and define detailed rules to ensure the swift implementation of this new legislative framework. And you have access to all these detailed list, templates, rules, also directly from the website of DG CLIMA. The last implementing act that we published was the list of shipping company that attribute to each shipping company an administering authority, and that act was published at the end of January this year. Again, if you want to go through these detailed legal texts, you have on our website a direct link to all the final version of these important texts. Next slide, please. So in order to help you fulfill your new obligations, we have put together, together with our colleagues from the European Maritime Safety Agency, EMSA, a number of resources that are available to you. You can find and access them mostly through our CLIMA, DG CLIMA website, but also through the website of EMSA. And typically you will find there a number of frequently asked questions related to the monitoring, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emission, but also specific questions in relation to how the ETS work and how the extension to maritime transport works. And you will also find there specific questions and answers in relation to the preparation of the monitoring plan. We have more than 100 questions available there. And we aim at revising and updating them frequently to also take on board the questions that we directly receive from market actors. What you can find on our website are also linked to past events, the ones that were mentioned by Polona in her introduction, that are also useful tools and useful piece of information focused on specific aspects linked to the compliance, to the implementation process. You also have there a list of contact points for the administering authorities per member states in case you want to directly contact them. In case you cannot find an answer to your questions, you are also invited to directly contact us using the generic email address that is presented there, so fit455@emsa.europai.eu, and we will do our best to then reply directly to your specific questions. But please, before addressing us with an email and a question, make sure that you have looked at all the many questions that are already and answers that are already available on our website. In terms of next step, we will also publish in the months to come revised and new best practice and guidance document that we will develop together with the right expert group and member states. And EMSA will also update the series of tutorial videos on how to navigate through THETIS MRV and use the new functionalities. Next slide, please. In terms of IT developments, it's important for you to understand that the new module in THETIS MRV that allows to revise the monitoring plan in line with the new template and in line with the new process for submission, verification, and approval is now fully functional in THETIS MRV. And similarly, THETIS MRV now includes the functions that allows attributing a shipping company to an administering authority. You should also note that it's possible now from an IT perspective to open a maritime operator holding account in the union registry. And for your reminder, the union registry is comparable to the banking system, if you want, behind the emission trading system. We are planning some new deployments of new IT modules in the months to come. The next important deployment will be the module linked to the revised emissions report that will be ready by the end of Q1 this year. And then we will deploy the new module related to the submission and the preparation of emissions reports and reports at company level. And this is planned for the end of the year. If you have any specific IT questions, so not really questions related to the implementation process or to the legal framework, if it's really IT questions, then you need to use this specific email address to get support directly from our EMSA colleagues. Next slide, please. So now we thought that it would be useful to go again with you through the first compliance step from a shipping company perspective. So the first step from a shipping company perspective is to select and cite the shipping, the legal entity that will become responsible for both the ETS implementation and the implementation of the monitoring, reporting, and verification rules. This is a very important step, and that's something that we have already covered extensively in our third webinar, the last one that we did in December. If you have any doubt on this aspect, I would really recommend you to consult, have a look at and listen to the last webinar we did on that aspect. Once the shipping company, the legal entity, has been clearly identified, you need also to consider any consequences such a decision have on existing contractual relationship with other stakeholders. That could be your verifier, for instance, but that could also be a charter, for instance. And in case you decide to appoint as the legal entity responsible for ETS and MRV an ISM company different from the registered ship owner, then you should also prepare the development of a mandate that will be necessary in order to comply with the rules, and notably to open a maritime operator holding account. So once this first step is done, the second step is for you to start revising the monitoring plan in THETIS MRV, of course, and to submit this revised monitoring plan to your verifier for assessment. And we'll go in more details about that process later in the presentation. Then you need also to request the opening of a maritime operator holding account in the union registry. And again, I insist that the union registry is a different IT system than THETIS MRV. And then there are two cases. If your shipping company, the one that has been appointed as being the legal entity responsible for ETS and MRV, is on the list of shipping company that was published by the end of January, then you need to request the opening of the account within 40 working days from the publication of the list, so from end of January. And in case the legal entity is not on the list, then you need to contact our colleagues from EMSA through the THETIS MRV help desk. And I gave you the list, I mean, the email address in the previous slide, in order to go through the attribution process and in order to ensure that your new company is attributed an administering authority, and in order for you to know which administering authority to contact in order to open the MOA account. Then by the 1st of April this year, so in a month's time, you will have to submit your assessed monitoring plan to your administering authority for approval. And only later in March, as from March next year, you will have to go through the process of submitting your verified emissions report. Saying that in case a ship experience a change of a shipping company during the reporting period, so in 2024, then you will have to submit a verified partial emissions report for the period for which you were responsible for the operation of the ship. And you will have to submit this partial emission report not later than 3 months after the change of the company. And we didn't cover the full compliance cycle because, as you know, the end of the compliance cycle is, of course, the surrendering, of allowances through in the union registry. I will stop here and I will pass the floor to my colleague Luca Colonna, who will give you more information about the topic of today, which is the preparation of monitoring plan.
Yes, thank you so much, Timothy. With this part of the presentation, we'll go a bit into the content of the monitoring plan, to be followed by a few slides on process and other information. As proceeding, this presentation will be based on the legal text, the main reference being Annex 1 to Implementing Regulation 2023-2449, which has amended and repealed the previous so-called Implementing Act on Templates 2016-9027 last November. As EMSA colleagues will show in details during the live demo, I wanted to anticipate to you that I will follow here the structure of the legal act, keeping in mind, however, that THETIS MRV as an IT system provides for plenty of flexibility in this respect. And in fact, EMSA colleagues will show a correspondence table clarifying where the relevant information is located in the THETIS MRV interface. This because THETIS MRV may regroup or slice certain section as per the Implementing Act. The revision of the Implementing Act was based, of course, on the need to cater for the revised monitoring and reporting rules following the revision of the regulation, but was carried out on the basis of continuity, so to try to ensure the maximum level of continuity with the monitoring plans that MRV users, MRV stakeholders have become familiar in through the last 5 reporting periods under MRV regulation. Next slide, please. So now dipping into the exact content of the monitoring plan, as you can see, the structure in 6 parts has been retained because there was no reason to amend it. Here in bold, the section which have been impacted by the main changes, notably part A, because of the new workflows and new actors involved following the regulation revision. Part B on basic data, which has been impacted in respect of the shipping company data, of the emission sources, the fuel type and emissions factors, due to the new rules on GHG monitoring as per the revised MRV annexes. And part E on management, which was restructured and reinforced following the introduction of a new Part C to Annex 1 on data management and control activities. On the contrary, Parts C, D, and F were left largely unchanged. Next slide, please. So going a bit into the details, Part A, as you can see, has been redrafted because we now have administering authority playing a role, and the part now includes reference to the parts where the revision or modifications have been made, and also brief explanation of changes. To be noted, however, that this part per se is not to be filled in by the user, because the logs like the version number, the reference date, and the status of reference data are automatically populated by THETIS MRV as an IT system. Next slide, please. Now moving to Part B on basic data, Table B1 and 2 on the identification data of the ship owner, and the shipping company were deeply amended. In terms of ownership, I would like also to recall that the owner shall always correspond to the register owner, which is the owner specified on the ship's certificate of registry. The notion of shipping company is to be meant as the regulated entity, meaning the company which has taken over responsibility for MRV and ETS compliance. So wherever we have a reference to the company in the monitoring plan, it has to be read as the shipping companies, in particular in respect of Table B2. And this is relevant because it will be the shipping company which is the one filling in and submitting formally the monitoring plan. As far as the company details, such as the company nature and their context details, these are sourced directly from the company section in THETIS MRV. And if there is a need to amend those, to update those, for instance, please note that this shall be made directly from the company, the Edit Company tab in the THETIS MRV user company page, not directly in the monitoring plan, at least for the time being. And this is an edit which can be carried out only by an account user with config admin role. If there is a need for the author of the monitoring plan to add additional contact details, for instance, of a third party, such as a company different from the shipping company who's providing operational support in filling in the monitoring plan, this could be added in the section additional information under the further info tab within the monitoring plan page of THETIS MRV. The reason being that it could still be of use to both the verifier and the administering authority to have these additional contact detail at hand. Next slide, please. Now, moving to Table B3, this table is about emission sources and fuel types. This has been amended, reflected the changes to Annex 1 to the MRV regulation. Apart from the emission sources type, which has been expanded, we can note the addition of the class of the emission source in addition to the type, which is there to allow for a further segregation of specific emission source types, where different emissions factors or slippage coefficients may apply within the same type. So this means that when this is not the case, the class may not be relevant or left empty in the IT environment. Next, please. And following up with Part B, we have a series of tables which are about emissions factors. Table B4 on the selection of the applicable emissions factor, B5 on the selection of the applicable slippage coefficient when relevant, which I would like to recall within the MRV annexes is defined as an emissions factor, and Table B8 and 9, which are about the procedures used for the determination and update of the applicable emissions factors. So within these tables, the company is asked to select for each potential fuel type that it plans to apply through the reporting period, the applicable relevant emissions factors, and if needed, also the slippage coefficient, by which the company will have to make a choice whether to select the default emissions factors, which is available in the system, reflecting point 2 part A of Annex 1 to the regulation, namely the table of default emissions factors, or to provide an actual emissions factors, which will have to be entered in the system manually. It is to be noted that the possibility to provide actual emissions factors is bound to the conditions and restrictions described in Annex 1 of MRV regulation as amended, which themselves refer to the international standard and certification references to be identified within the FuelEU Maritime regulation context. So there is full alignment on that respect. And as previously mentioned, B8 and B9, they are about procedure used for the determination and update of those emissions factors. Also covering the CO2 emissions factors for biofuels and RFNBOs under Annex 2, so where a zero rating within ETS scope is applied. Such procedures shall also ensure that the changes of the applied fuel types and emissions factors are tracked during the period, and include methods applied for proving compliance with sustainability and GHG savings criteria for biofuels. Next slide, please. Table B6 is the new addition to this part to reflect the need to provide information in the cases where carbon capture and storage technologies are applied on board the ship. It will be required to provide a description of the installed technology, reference to the emission sources to which the different technologies are applied, and the evidence for compliance and relevant information as required by the implementing acts on CCS, CCU technologies which are under development. Table B7 has been left unchanged. It's the table about the procedures to be applied to manage and maintain updated emission source lists, so to ensure their completeness. An example of such a procedure could be regular checks or specific action to be taken where known changes take place on board. For instance, when new emission sources are installed. Next slide, please. Now, since we talk about procedures in the monitoring plan, I would like here to spend a few additional words on how procedures shall be described in the monitoring plan. Because it's important to stress that simply including a mere reference to an existing procedure outside, which is established somewhere outside of the monitoring plan, is not enough. It cannot be enough. Because the purpose of describing procedures in the monitoring plan is to provide a high-level understanding, an overview for the reader of the monitoring plan, which is the verifier and the administering authority, to understand that specific procedure in the context of the overall monitoring system applied by the ship. This means that filling in this procedure table, which I'm pretty sure you are very familiar with, there are many of those in the monitoring plan, with just a reference to the external reference is not enough. So reference can work, but if there is a reference, a brief description of or summary of the procedure itself shall also be added. Alternatively, when there is no such an external reference, because for instance, we're talking about a procedure which is very simple and basic, the full description of the procedure can be included in the monitoring plan. And here you can see the text of recital 5 of the implementing regulation, which makes these extremely clear. Next slide, please. So linked to this, the importance also of written procedure, because written procedure are it's a term which describes the external source where the full procedure is described in detail. It is always possible for the company to refer to an external written procedure, but it's important to note that the purpose of the written procedure is also to be made available to the verifier on the administrating authority in case of need, in case of request. So it has to be accessible. There are specific obligations which are set by Part C of Annex 1, in which the written procedure shall be established. So it's not a voluntary option. And these are the cases of description of data flow activities, for the risk assessment, and for control activities. Also, in the case of avoidance of future data gaps, this is needed, but I will come back to this point later on because it's a bit of an intimate situation. That being said, it's always possible for the company to establish further written procedure outside of the monitoring plan. And it can be sometimes found useful by the company as well, because by establishing an external written procedure, this means that a simpler brief description can be provided in the monitoring plan. And this also provides additional flexibility to the monitoring plan, because if the procedure at hand we're talking about is an overly complex one or is subject to frequent changes, referring to an external written procedures will save the company the need, most likely, to amend the monitoring place where changes to the procedure, minor changes to the procedure takes place. Next slide, please. Now coming to part C. Part C, as you know, it's a very bulky part, a lot of information provided in there. It's structured in 6 tables, but in fact under table C2 we have 12 sub-tables. This part remained largely unchanged. It was only impacted by some changes under table C1 and C3, as you can see from this slide, to cater for the extension to ETS, the ETS scope, and the derogations especially. I will not go into the details of the different tables. Suffice to say that especially under C2, many of these tables might not be needed. Either they are ship specific, so they are activated only if some ship type are monitored, either they are linked to voluntary monitoring. And again, linked to what I said before, many of those are about procedure description. Next slide, please. Now moving to part D. Part D is about data gaps treatment. As you might already know, data gaps may occur, even though they should be tried to be minimized as much as possible. And the role of part D is to describe and list the procedure and methods which are established by the company to close such gaps in the event where such gaps would occur. In fact, it is structured into 4 parts, because each table refer to a different data, and the procedure is to be described on the system foreseen in the company to tackle that specific data gap. So we have fuel consumption, distance traveled, cargo carried, and time spent at sea. Those should be filled and managed, having in mind the rules to prevent and correct data gaps, which have been also reinforced and amended through, again, part C of Annex 1. Those can always be described also in more detail in external written procedure. And also there is a particularity which is described under part C of Annex 1, because the monitoring plan by itself will list the alternative methods that company will apply to close these potential data gaps in this section that you see here in the slide. But it's always possible, there is always the eventuality that such methods will not be applicable by the company. And if that happens, then the company, according to Part C, will have to recur to estimation methods to produce conservative data. And what Part C stresses is that if that should happen, then an obligation to establish written procedure to avoid future data gaps shall be established by the company. Next slide, please. Now, before closing on Part E, I would like to stress very briefly what Part E is about. It's about data management and control, and it's about mostly the control system to be established by the company. This is a very important point, which again has been revised and further enforced with the revision of the MRV annexes, and in particular Part C. And since some concepts have been expanded and elaborated to align to the ETS for stationary, we also issued some guidance through FAQ on monitoring plan revision. This is an hyperlink, so by clicking on it, you can access those. There is a set of 25 questions. In case you have not read them, they will assist you in revising the monitoring plan. And there are also cross-references to the ETS stationary guidance document as applicable. The importance of a sound control system cannot be stressed enough in the context of EU ETS. Here, in the interest of time, suffice to say that there are 3 main elements on which it shall be based. the establishment of procedures for data flow, where basically the company will describe how the relevant data is collected and aggregated for the purpose of the emission report. Such a description can, for instance, take the form of a flow diagram or a simple description if it's if it's a basic procedure. And this, for instance, could refer to the reading of instruments, so how the samples are managed, how the calculations are carried on, and the storage of data. The second pillar is the risk assessment, which de facto is the very first step of any control system, which is used by the company to identify risk, to identify the points, weak points in the data flow, where control activities are needed. And once the company identifies risk, it will establish then control activities to mitigate such risk. And this is in fact what the third point refers to. The needed control system are in fact explicitly listed in Part C of Annex 1. And these include, for instance, quality assurance for the measurement instrument, quality assurance system for the IT equipment, or internal reviews and validation of data systems. Next slide, please. And this is just to link to what's said above. Part E of the monitoring plan is about the management system. So 2 new tables were added due to the revised data management and control provisions. Now we have a table where we have a description of a procedure for the data flow activity, which will refer notably to the external written procedure needed to this end, and table E3 on the procedures for risk assessment, which is not the risk assessment itself, which needs to be produced outside of the monitoring plan, but it's a description of the procedures linked to that. And all the other relevant tables, A1 and A4 to A8, remained unchanged. With this one, I pass the floor to Mathieu because part F on additional information remain unchanged.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you for having guided us through the content of the monitoring plan. Now let's take a step back and recap the main process related to the monitoring plan preparation and submission. So in terms of process, the first obligation for companies is, of course, to revise or update the monitoring plan and submit it to the verifier and then to the administrating authority. So for each ship under its responsibility and falling under ETS scope, the company shall submit a monitoring plan assessed by an accredited verifier to the administrating authority for approval. And there are 2 different deadlines in the regulation. It is 1st April 2024 for a ship that is already falling within the scope of MRV, or no later than 3 months after the ship's first port of call, if the ship falls within the scope for the first time after 1st January 2024. Once the monitoring plan is submitted to the authority, then administrating authorities shall issue their decision on the approval of the monitoring plan at the latest by 6 June 2025, or for all ships falling within the scope for the first time after 1st January 2024, within 4 months from the first port of call in a member state port. At the bottom of this slide, you see a graph that is basically showing the workflow in THETIS MRV for the monitoring plan, with the different actions that the shipping company should follow with different steps. So first you have the monitoring plan as a draft that the shipping company prepares. And once it is ready, the company submits the monitoring plan to the verifier. So the verifier then assesses the content of the monitoring plan. And in this case, in what you see on the slide, there is no back and forth, but there can be back and forth between the company and the verifier in case the verifier identifies any issues with the monitoring plan. But if everything is fine, then the monitoring plan will be marked as assessed by the verifier. And then it shall also be the company who shall then submit it through THETIS MRV to the administrating authority. And then the authority will receive the monitoring plan, analyze it, and once it is approved, it will be marked in THETIS MRV as approved by the authority. But we will see a live demo right after this presentation by EMSA colleagues. In terms of process, it is also important to mention that there is an obligation for companies to keep the monitoring plan up to date, which means that companies should check regularly and at least annually whether the ship's monitoring plan reflects the nature and the functioning of the ship and whether the monitoring methodology can be improved. And if you look at Article 7, Paragraph 2 of the MRV regulation, there are different cases that are made explicit where a company shall modify the monitoring plan. Here on this slide, you can see a list of these different elements that trigger a revision of the monitoring plan, such as a change of company, if there are new greenhouse gas emissions that are generated due to new emission sources or new fuel types, in case of any change in the availability of data. For instance, if the ship uses new types of measuring equipment and so on. If the data resulting from the monitoring method has been found to be incorrect, of course, then the plan must be updated. And the same if any part of the plan has been found to be not in conformity by the verifier or by the company itself. In case of modifications of the monitoring plan, the companies shall notify the verifiers without undue delay and submit the changes to the verifier for assessment. All those changes are subject to assessment by the verifier, except, in fact, the very first one, the change of company. If nothing else changes in the monitoring plan, but only the company changes, then there is no need for the verifier to redo a full assessment of the monitoring plan, but it will be submitted to the administrating authority for approval. So still, in such a case, there would be the authority having to approve a change of company. Finally, the last slide, which is a good transition to what is coming now, which is a live demo of THETIS MRV, because of course now everything should happen within THETIS MRV, because the regulation has established the obligation to use electronic templates and submit the monitoring plan through this IT platform. It can be done either by filling in the monitoring plan directly in THETIS MRV or by uploading files in a compliant format extension that is made available on THETIS MRV website. Just a few additional elements on this on the monitoring plan, just to remind you that it is ship specific, which means that there is one monitoring plan per ship, not per company, but per ship. However, there is a possibility to reuse some information for the different ships, because you have in this plan some information that is ship specific, but you also have some information that is company specific. And this company specific information can be reused if the same company, if the ship is under the same company's responsibility. Also worth mentioning that on MRV and FuelEU relationships, please note that there will be in principle 2 different monitoring plans to be provided according to 2 different templates. Also, the actors and the workflow involved will be different, but THETIS MRV will maximize the synergies between the 2, allowing the users to reuse the relevant information previously entered when creating and submitting the monitoring plan. So synergies will be looked at and reinforced through THETIS MRV. Please note as well that there is flexibility in terms of the language for the monitoring plan, but there is an obligation to provide an English translation of the monitoring plan as assessed by the verifier. Finally, it is worth noting that THETIS MRV allows for attachments. So when a company submits a monitoring plan, the company can attach a set of documents, including, for instance, the monetary assessment report issued by the verifier on the monitoring plan, or, for instance, a copy of the mandate between the registered owner and the ISM company, if relevant, of course. Once attached to the monitoring plan of a ship, such documents will be available to the relevant users in the monitoring plan workflow, meaning that verifiers will have access to those documents and authorities as well. That's it from our side, and now leave the floor back to Polona. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathieu. Thank you, Timothée, and thank you, Luca. Indeed, we will now proceed to the next presentation, so the live demo, which will be given by our colleagues of EMSA, so the European Maritime Safety Agency. So, colleagues, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Polona. So, good morning to all the participants. I'm going to share my screen and start our presentation. So I hope everybody can see the screen. So our presentation, today's presentation, is split in two parts. First, we are going to go through an overview of the THETIS MRV basic structure and principles and concepts. We will discuss some points, namely the user accounts structure, the monitoring plan workflow, and the monitoring plan status, and the monitoring plan and the relation with the templates that are under the new legislation. The second part is going to be, in fact, the THETIS MRV Live Demo, which will show some of these features. So on this slide, we have a diagram with the user account structure used on THETIS MRV, where at the middle we have the company user account, and the principle starts always with the THETIS user account as a config administrator. This config administrator account can create several users under this account. These users can be ordinary users that can have limited access to some of the features on the system, or can also be another config administrator. We recommend to have, of course, the control of the config administrator because of the capacity that this administrator has. Under the THETIS user account, the shipping companies must be created, and that's a responsibility of the user account config administrator. And under the shipping company, you can add as many ships as wanted. Each one of the ships is linked to a verifier, and the option to choose the verifier is also open. As it has been said before, the shipping company can only be, at this moment, registered owners or ISM companies, and all the ships that are below the shipping company must be under this principle of responsibility for the registered owner or the ISM through the mandate in those situations for ISM companies. It is also important to understand that config administrators can edit and change the sensitive information like the company details and the person of contact of the company. So this is something that is under the control of the config administrator, but not under the control of the other normal users created by the head of this structure. On the right side, we have the administering authority situation, where they also have THETIS user account with a config administrator and further user roles, which in this case are not relevant for this presentation. The link between the administering authority and the company is through the attribution list that was published and the attribution of the company to each one of the administering authorities. If for some reason the shipping company is not on this attribution list, EMSA help desk will support on link and on the attribution of the administering authority to that company. Of course, the shipping company must be created on the system, and some ships must be added to, or the relevant ships must be added to the shipping company. It's also important to understand that the user account config administrator can see all the ships that are below this structure, as well as the created users on the structure. The same happens to the administering authority, which can see on my fleet all the vessels that are under this shipping company. We are now going to a more an optional solution and slightly more complex, where we have the user account and the THETIS user account with the config administrator, which is managing more than one shipping company. The shipping company must, as before, must be the same nature, so register owner or ISM, but they can be different. So the shipping company A can be a register owner, the shipping company B can be an ISM company. The vessels that are added below the shipping companies have the same principle as before. And again, the config administrator is the only one that can manage and edit or change the company details of the person of contacts. On the right side now, we have just on this example, two administering authorities, which are linked to the companies, and they are separate. So they are independent because the shipping company attribution algorithm attached one company to an administering authority and the other company to the second administering authority. As it was said before, each one of the administering authorities can see the ships below the company and under the responsibility of the company. And of course, they cannot see the other company which are not under the management of that administering authority. And again, we must make clear that all users that are under the company account can see all the ships, even if they are in different shipping companies, which means that in this case, all the users from the company can see ship 1, ship 2, and ship 3 all the time. So this gives an overview of the user accounts, and it's quite relevant because we got several questions related to this kind of structure. So we think it's quite important to point out this structure. Now, the second point that we would like to verify is the monitoring plan workflow. And in the monitoring plan workflow, it's important to distinguish between the actions and the status. So we have several actions made by companies, verifiers, and administering authorities. The THETIS MRV workflow is the one shown on this slide. And we have, as we have said before, everything starts at the company level, drafting the monitoring plan, and the first action is the submission of the monitoring plan to the verifier. So at the next stage, we have the status of submitted to verifier, which then moves to a new action, the action taken by the verifier. The verifier has to do the assessment of the monitoring plan, and if it is okay, it moves to a new status, the assessed status. Then this status is to be taken care by the company again, which must submit the monitoring plan to the administering authority. And then the status changes again to submit it to the administering authority. The next step is for the administering authority to take action, and the action will lead to a new status, which is the approved, or if something is not right, everything can go back one step back and changing the status for under revision or deleted in the ultimate case. So when we understand the structure of the monitoring plan workflow, we can understand the same information on the THETIS MRV application. And for the monitoring plan status list, you can have a drop-down list that can filter the status of all the vessels that are on your My Fleet list. And of course, you can also see the status which is on the list as pointed out by the arrows. So some of these status are related to companies, and some others are related to the verifiers, and the latest one, the approved one, is of course related to the administrative authority. Now let's move now to the monitoring plan template and compare the templates for monitoring plan as they are on the legislation with the THETIS MRV structure. So we have seen that the monitoring plan is divided on 6 parts from A to F, and when we look at these parts, and we will follow up the identification of these parts at the THETIS MRV application. So starting with part A, on the revision record sheet, you can see that this part is referenced at the monitoring plan revision on the right side tab of this of the application. When we move on to part B, which is the part related to basic data, we start with the ship basic information, and the ship basic information comes from your My Fleet list when you had a ship and specified the ship and put it under the control of the company. On the company, you have the details of your company, which comes from the config tab on the top, and so it is filled before, and it will come to this monitoring plan table as imported from the information that you have put it before. Then we have several tables from B3 up to B9, which still are basic data, and you can find it under the tabs of emission sources, fuel types, and emission factors, and this one for carbon capture, storage, and utilization. Then we can move to a new layer of information, which is the information that comes from part C, which is the activity data. And this is a full information that are under some of these tabs. You can see the tables that comes from C1 up to C6, and table C2.1 up to C2.12. It's very detailed information that must be added, and depending on the nature of the information, it will be fitted under different tabs. So you can find information about measuring equipments, emission sources, the fuel tanks on board, the fuel types and emission factors, and fuel consumptions. Then you have on the right side the navigation and the ship cargo details about the activity. It is important to understand that some of these tables are linked to each other. So depending on the information that you are filling in, you will not see all the tables available. For example, you can only see RoPax information and details from table C2.9 if your ship is a RoPax ship. The same happens for chemical ships, oil tankers, which are specific, which have specific information depending on the ship types. Then you have a new layer of information which comes from part B of the legislation on data gaps, and data gaps are related to some specific operations. So it will be under fuel consumption and navigation and cargo data. Finally, you have part E and part F, which are procedure and management procedures under table E, from table E1 up to table E8, which are under the control activities tab, and further information for the information related on part F. So with this overview of the tables from the legislation and the system tabs, you can organize all the information and go through the monitoring plan implementation on THETIS MRV. So now I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, which will proceed with a live demo where you can see some of these features as well.
Thank you, Ricardo. So I will continue the demonstration. So just give me a moment to share my screen.
Ready, sharing.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with the disclaimer that everything what I'm gonna show you today, all the information about the ships, about the companies, and also the examples of the monitoring plans, they are for the demonstration purposes only. So let's start. And I will try to make links with the information already shown by my colleague Ricardo. So before jumping into the monitoring plan, let's spend some minutes on talking about company accounts and also user accounts in THETIS MRV. So therefore, we switch to the config section, where we have the functionality both for user management and company management. So in the users tab of config section, you can see that we have two users created for this THETIS MRV account. And in this case, one of them has the role of config administrator, meaning this user is managing the other users. He can create more users, will get access to the fleet of all companies under this THETIS account, and also can remove users or assign config administrator roles to delegate this particular functionality. So it's important to note that you can see in the upper right corner that I'm currently logged in as this test user, Jack, which is config administrator. So that's why we can see this list. The management is quite straightforward. So you can see that there are options to create a user, and for the created users, you can edit, you can change password, or you can manage roles, as I already mentioned. Same goes for the company records management under this THETIS account. So if we switch to the companies tab, we can see that one THETIS MRV account can manage several companies with different ships in their fleets. In this particular example, for the demonstration purposes, you can see that I have two different companies. I have the Oceanics ship owner from Belgium and deep sea tankers from Portugal. Also important note here that management of the companies inside of the THETIS account, meaning creation of the new company or editing the company details, this functionality only available to the user with a config administrator role. The usage of the companies will be available to all users. So it means that the config administrator first creates and configures the company records, and then all the users will be able to assign those companies, for example, to create monitoring plans, to create emissions reports for them. Another important note here. Notice that there is the attributed to column and also in this screen where you can clearly see that one of the companies, in this case Oceanics, has been already and is already attributed to a member state, to administrative authority from Belgium, while the second company has this field here blank, meaning that it's not yet attributed. So I specifically chose this combination so that you can see that and also to remind you that in order to attribute new companies under your accounts, for example, the ones which you recently created, or the companies which have not been included in the list which was published by the European Commission, by DG CLIMA, so that this attribution can happen on case-by-case basis by sending the request to THETIS help desk, to us, and we will do it on a one-to-one, case-by-case. We will attribute, and that's what we are doing since the beginning of this year. No, since February, sorry. So the important thing here is to mention that before sending the request to us, please make sure that you have added all the ships under the company responsibility in the fleet of that particular company. This is important, especially for the companies which are not registered in one of the European countries, because the algorithm will take into account the port calls of the ships under responsibility of the company. Okay, so another maybe important note here is that it's important to configure the record of each company correctly, meaning the details of the company itself and also of the representative, in this case contact person, in the record of the company, because this information is going to be used in all other documents produced and by this company, meaning monitoring plan, emission report. The information from this record will be used in those documents. I will show it a bit later when we get to the monitoring plan. So this is important to remember. Okay, so let's switch now. Let's switch to the actual monitoring plan creation functionality and options. I will switch back to my fleet. Another small note, also corresponding to what Ricardo already showed you before. You can see that here on my fleet, the users can see all the ships under responsibility of all the companies which are managed by this user account in THETIS MRV. In this case, you can see that the first ship is under the responsibility of Oceanics and the second one under the deep sea tankers. The names are for the demonstration. Okay, so the system allows you several options for the creation of the monitoring plan. One of them being to use the interface. So in order to create the monitoring plan using the interface, you shall choose the ship record from the My Fleet page and choose monitoring plan create. In this case, in this example, since I already created, and you can see, therefore, I don't have the create, I have the edit. So we can continue with the content part. The content of the monitoring plan is distributed between different tabs in THETIS MRV system, starting with monitoring plan particulars tab, which has just specific important information like the creation date, the current status, the date of the first submission to verifier, and the first submission to administering authority. In this case, you can see that I have created this plan like a few days before the demonstration on the 1st of March, and it's still in the draft status. Let's go through a few of the content tabs. Like the first one is the information about the ship. Here it's again important to note that this information should be compliant with the ship particulars of the ship itself. If it's not corresponding to the ship details, if the ship details have been updated due to some reason, then the system will spot this issue and will show you the warning, which you can see now on the top of the screen in yellow. This is called the message board. And if we read it, we see that warning, the following ship particulars are different from those recorded on the ship page. So in this case, the best action, what can be done by you, is to update the particulars of a ship from the actual ship data. In THETIS MRV, it can be done very easily by clicking the button Update from Ship Data and to confirm it. Now we can see that the name has been updated accordingly, and this warning will disappear after like we will notice when it will disappear. It does not happen always momentarily. Okay, let's continue. The next tab contains the company information, and here again, important to note what I already highlighted in the company section, that this information is coming from the company record configured by config administrator in the config tab of the THETIS MRV account. And you can see that indeed this Oceanics, we can see that all the details, including the contact person, is coming from the company record. Same idea as with the ship particulars, to make sure that it's always up to date. We recommend also to update it from the company data in this case to have it consistent. So in this case, it was already consistent, so you will see that nothing has changed after this action. Okay, let's continue. And now you can notice that the yellow message disappeared finally. So it might take some time in the system to process those notifications. Okay, let's continue. We are not going to go through all the tabs because you can imagine that it will take a huge amount of time if we will start drafting the monitoring plan here during the webinar. So I will just show you a few kind of interesting and important aspects of filling in information, and maybe some also to highlight some common issues which we are getting in the help desk, so that you can already be prepared and know how to solve them. So let's go to the emission sources tab of the monitoring plan, which is the tab where we can include information about the emission sources and also corresponding procedures. So let's add the emission source. Again, for the demonstration reasons, I will just put some information here. So for example, you can see that it can be just filled in using the interface. And here, for example, is the first example which I wanted to highlight, is regarding the slippage coefficient for the fuel types. So in this case, you can see, since I filled in only this part, I haven't yet chosen the fuel type. You can see that this option to check the slippage is not available. However, when I go and choose, for example, diesel oil as the fuel type, the button becomes available, so meaning that you can click it. However, in this case, the table for the slippage coefficient, slippage percentage, is not available. Why? Because for diesel, the slippage is not to be, how to say, it's not applicable, the slippage for this type of the fuel, which means that in case you use the different fuel type, or let's just illustrate that, if we choose LNG, for example, then clicking the slippage button, you will see the table with the slip percentages defined for this fuel type. And in this case, again, you can see that it's default, and those values are coming from the regulation. They are set there, and therefore in this case there is no option to amend it, so you cannot change them, but you can see they are here. Okay, monitoring method. So I will just continue filling in so that you can see the idea how it works. For example, measuring equipment. In this case, we skipped the tab, the measuring equipment. However, I already had it filled in, so therefore we have the measuring equipment defined by us available to be chosen. Okay, let's choose something and let's save it. So you can see it's quite straightforward. Another entry has been added by us into this table. And coming back to the measuring equipment, you can see that the one which I used has been added by me, this gauge number 1. Okay, let's continue further. In case there is a procedure to be filled in, here it's very straightforward. There are fields to be filled in, and it will be appearing there. Another interesting part which I wanted to show you here is, for example, in this fuel types and emission factors. So we can see already that we have some error which is displayed to us while working on the monitoring plan. Always take a note of the message board, because the system is actually helping you while you are filling in the contents. So, and if you notice that this error says that fuel types identified in the emission source table and in the fuel types table are not in line. What does it mean? It means that there is no consistency between fuel types chosen or added into this table, which is in this case diesel, oil, and LNG. And in the emission sources, we can see that we have diesel oil, LNG, ethanol, and LNG. So this one is, you see that there is inconsistency. How to fix that? Easy, depending on what is the correct behavior or correct content. Either this entry was added by mistake, in this case it can be just deleted from here, or in case it's missing in the fuel types, the fuel can be added into this section. Let me just quickly do it. So you can see I'm choosing it there, saving, and now also we can wait a bit, and this message, this error should disappear. Okay. So let's continue. As I said, we are not gonna go through all the tabs in this. Oh, you see, it's gone. Okay, so let's go further a bit, explore some other. So first of all, you can add, in case there is a need, you can upload any documents in addition to information which you filled in during different tabs of the monitoring plan. In the last tab, docs, there is a possibility to add different types of predefined documents. There is a long list, including the mandate by the ship owner to the ISM company. And you can add the document here. Yeah, if needed, some description can be added and so on. And coming back to the question from the chat, the file size, the size of the document, the size of the file, the limit of the file size has been increased indeed, and now it is 10 megabytes. So it means that you can upload different files in case necessary. Okay, if something was done, you can delete it and so on. Okay, let's continue. In the monitoring plan revision tab, you can see the revisions of the monitoring plan. And here it's very important because this tab allows you to actually to download and to create like the PDF version of your monitoring plan. In my case, you can see that one revision has been already created by the company basically yesterday while testing. You can create yourself any number of revisions necessary in case you have been updating information. Every new revision will be corresponding to the current status and current content of the monitoring plan, and it can be downloaded easily from this section. And in this case, as I said, this revision is actually, you can see that the title, it's actually the monitoring plan. It shows like the current version and all the information in from the content. Important to note here that it is not the same as printing your monitoring plan to PDF. So you can see that also there is a button, the workflow button. However, print to PDF means just simply to print all the screens of the monitoring plan and to save it as PDF. That's it. And if we click it, it's just really quickly to illustrate that of course, the content in this case will be the same. However, you can see right away from the title of this printout that this one is not the actual monitoring plan. It's just the printout of all the screens. And you can use it while working on the monitoring plan. Indeed, also the message boards are also printed out because you see it on the screen. So this is very important to know the difference. Okay, so let's, we don't have much time, as I said, for the demonstration. So now I think we are ready to submit to the verifier. However, we can see that submission button is not available. That's another important thing which I wanted to highlight here. There could be many situations where you will end up in this particular case. And one of the first things to check from your side would be if the verifier is assigned to the ship. And in this case, you can see that the verifier here is empty. So that's the meaning that if we don't have the verifier assigned, of course, the system would not be able to submit because it would not know where to submit it. In this case, let me just quickly show you, and then we will, I think we'll close this. So in order to assign the verifier, you need to go to the ship record. And in this case, you see it's empty. And I'm assigning the verifier, which I have configured. And very important note also for this particular message, that it's very important to keep this check mark, update monitoring plan, meaning that if the monitoring plan has been already drafted before adding the verifier, it's important to keep it checked, meaning that the verifier details of the ship will be translated into the monitoring plan. Okay, we've done that. And now we can see, first of all, we see that the verifier is assigned. And right away, we can see that submit to verifier button becomes available. And I will finish my demonstration by clicking this button. And again, on every action of the workflow, for you, it's possible to generate the monitoring plan revision. This is not, how to say, it's not an obligation, so you can choose to generate a revision. In this case, you can check this. Okay, so I think I used all my time, maybe even a bit more. And now we can see that the monitoring plan is submitted to verifier. Maybe just one last very short information is that I was showing you how to do it using the interface. However, the system allows to upload monitoring plans using the bulk uploads of XML. Then it's using this. and all the files for the XML interface, meaning documentation, XSD schemas, and also examples, are available in the support section in this particular subsection. Okay, I think I can close my part. Thank you.
Thank you. So we give the floor back to you in Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, Tatiana, and colleagues for this presentation. So with that, I think we can basically turn to the questions that we noted in the chat, and thank you very much for submitting those and your active participation. So I would propose that colleagues turn to answering those questions as far as we can in today's sessions, of course.
Yes, thank you so much, Polona. So we receive many questions in the chat. Most of them are about IT and THETIS MRV. But before going to that, I would like to address a couple of them which were more of general interest. And on the templates, as in the Legal Act in particular, some of you noticed that verifiers ask for our revision due to the lack, the missing of some information in the submitted monitoring plan. And indeed, just to clarify, that every element which is listed in the template, as in the Legal Act, Annex 1 of the implementing regulation, shall be deemed as mandatory, unless if it's clearly marked as voluntary, or if it's ship dependent, meaning that it only applies to some specific ship types, or it's linked to some voluntary monitoring, so as in the case of some procedure description. In all other cases, the template as fill-in in THETIS MRV shall include all the elements, and it's ultimately the responsibility of the verifiers to check that. And it's also in the interest of the shipping company to make sure that all the fields in THETIS MRV are fill-in. We are aware that the IT system provides additional flexibility, and sometimes there are no blocking functions, so the monitoring plan can technically be submitted even if some fields are left empty. But it's clear that the templates ask for the monitoring plan to be complete. So please make sure that it's duly filled in and complete, because otherwise it will be the verifier's job to ask for a revision. And if that would not be the case, it will be the administering authority downstream to find that out. And so it's in everybody's interest to tackle that as soon as possible. A further question we received, I would like to briefly mention as well, is about, again, the identification of the shipping company, in particular in respect to the role of bareboat charters. This is not really under the focus of today's webinar, but I would like to stress again, please, if you still have doubts about the identification of the regulated entity, the shipping company, who can assume responsibility for MRV and ETS, please refer back to our third webinar held in December, because that's super clear, very complete. It also has links to the union registry consequences of this. And also I would like to remind you there will be a further webinar specifically on union registry, which will be relevant for that as well. But that being said, on bareboat charterers, I would like to stress again that unless the bareboat charterer is an ISM company in respect of the ship, or is also the registered ship owner of the ship, there is no way by which the bareboat charterer can qualify as a shipping company, meaning the legal entity assuming legal responsibility over MRV and ETS. This is not in line with the legal text. That being said, there are ways for bareboat charterer to still play a role. The one showed by EMSA colleagues on the different options for THETIS MRV accounts, for instance, show how a third company such as a bareboat charterer, who's now the shipping company, can help support the regulated entity in acting in THETIS MRV, meaning filling in data, submitting data. And this is again a strictly operational support. It does not waive the regulated entity from the ultimate responsibility. But there are also ways for the same bareboat charterer to take actions, for instance, in respect of the union registry, to even apply and open a MOA. How? Well, if the bareboat charterer obtains a power of attorney from the register, the regulated entity, the shipping company, it will be possible for it to ask for the opening of a MOA, to sign basically the request and contracts in name of the regulated entity. Again, it has to be clear that this not waive the regulated entity from its responsibility, and this is just a mechanism by which, a general mechanism, a general feature by which the bareboat charterer can act on behalf of the regulated entity on the basis of this power of attorney. And if you want to know more, to have confirmation about how to get this power of attorney, it's highly recommended that you consult the administering authority, the relevant administering authority, or the contact point in the union registry, because it will be ultimately to them to accept the validity of such power of attorney. And with this question, I pass the floor to our EMSA colleagues in Lisbon.
Okay, thank you, Luca. So we received a lot of questions. We are identified some that we will answer. So one question is the upload of supporting docs such as sea trial, shop test, etc. in THETIS MRV platform as part of the EU MRV monitoring plan assessment required? These documents must be discussed with the verifier if they are relevant or not, and can be uploaded on the system if there's an agreement, or if the company and the verifier takes it as relevant to be added on the system or not. Another question, these documents are available to verifiers on THETIS MRV platform as a restriction of 1 megabytes per file, which makes it practically impossible. So as we have said, Tatiana said on the presentation, so this size of 1 megabyte has been increased to up to 10 megabytes. So we believe that it will fit the majority of situations in the future. We also have another question. Where can the verifiers find the technical description in the monitoring plan? It's not presented in the downloaded version of PDF of the monitoring plan. Yes, we are in fact aware of this situation, and it will be addressed in one of the future releases. There was also another question regarding the release on the number of the present release and the operational one. So in fact, on this demonstration, we were using a 6.2 version, which will be available in very shortly. So, but the principles are basically the same. We have also another question. In case of change of owners, who is responsible to disconnect the ship from the company within THETIS MRV? What can be done if old owner does not release the vessel in the portal? How can new owner upload the revised MRV plan? It is in fact the previous owner responsible to disconnect the ship and release the ship. If for some reason the companies cannot get to an agreement, or if there is a blocking situation, then you can address the question to EMSA help desk, which will support on a case-by-case specific situation. Can the config administrator be a person from the head office and not the relevant shipping company in case of a group of companies? Yeah. Config admin is a role which is initially attributed to a self-created user. So this is the principle, as we explained. And this user will be able to create new users account and assign roles as relevant, such as config admin, or just ordinary normal users without control of the company's details or the creation of new companies. So it depends on the cases, and there is this flexibility on the system. Okay, so I think that's for the moment, and I'll give the floor back to you in Brussels.
Thank you very much, Luca and Ricardo. With that, I think we're approaching the end of the discussion today. We hope it was useful. So thank you again for your active participation and several or a high number of questions in the chat, which I think showed that you, as the relevant stakeholders, are taking concrete actions to ensure smooth compliance of the EU ETS extension to the maritime sector and your ETS obligations. And we are confident that jointly with us, with EMSA, with the competent authorities in member states, we will ensure timely compliance for all entities following here, but also more broadly. So we very much remain committed to support in implementation, and we will keep informing you and also other public through further webinars, as mentioned, throughout 2024. We invite you to actively check our website, so DG CLIMA website and EMSA websites, to remain updated on further communication initiatives and reach out to the functional help desk mailboxes that were already showed in today's presentation. You will find all relevant links in the slides presented today, and we were also sharing now in the chat also links to the list of national authorities that you can contact, both in their sort of role as administrating authority for the ETS extension, and also to the list to the registry authorities in the member states. So with that, thank you again. I close the seminar, but we look forward to seeing you soon in the next seminar on the 18th of March.